Before we start, we need to warn you about what you're going to hear. This story is for teaching and entertainment only. This is what really happened in a real court case about Sean Diddy Combs. We're telling you about Jamie Foxx's shocking court testimony that's making Diddy really upset. Why did this famous actor risk everything to come forward with proof so scary that even court workers had to look away? In a federal courtroom where Sean Diddy Combs is facing serious charges, Jamie Foxx showed up unexpectedly, not as a celebrity, not as an entertainer, but as a witness with proof that could change everything. A man with secret recordings, text messages, and stories about a hidden room under a Los Angeles mansion, a place where they say countless victims were brought in, only to leave forever changed. They left at all. And then came a bombshell. The recordings, audio so disturbing that when they played them in court, Diddy slammed his fist on the table, tears running down his face as he shook uncontrollably, while Jamie Foxx stood strong, his eyes never leaving the music mogul who once seemed untouchable. Why would Jamie Foxx dare to come forward now knowing he could lose everything? And what else is still hidden behind those music contracts, $1,000,000 parties, and a business empire built on what prosecutors are calling systematic abuse and intimidation? This isn't just a trial. It's a fight between truth and power, between one man brave enough to expose what he saw and another who believed his influence could buy silence forever. The full story, raw and unfiltered, begins now with Jamie Foxx's testimony, and what he's revealed will make sure you never see the entertainment industry the same way again. If you want to stay updated on this developing story, make sure to like and subscribe for the latest updates as this unprecedented case unfolds. I'm standing in front of the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, where one of the most shocking trials in entertainment history continues to happen. The atmosphere today was unlike anything I've seen in my years covering big cases. Nobody expected Jamie Foxx. The room was tense, eyes focused on the prosecution's table until the side door opened. People gasped. Even the judge froze. No announcement, no written statement. Just Jamie Foxx walking in with determined steps, his face showing grim resolve. Until that moment, Diddy had stayed calm throughout the proceedings. But something had changed. Maybe it was seeing a former friend and industry colleague appear for the prosecution. Maybe it was knowing what evidence Jamie had. Maybe it was realizing that his carefully built world was about to fall apart. Whatever it was, Diddy was visibly shaken, his usual confident behavior crumbling before our eyes. Jamie wasn't there performing as an actor. He was there as a witness who had seen too much and said too little for far too long. And when he began to speak, the courtroom wasn't ready for what they would hear. Because what Jamie Foxx revealed about the private parties, the recording studio sessions, and the basement beneath Diddy's Los Angeles mansion wasn't just explosive. It was a warning about power unchecked and an industry built on silence. "I'm here today," Jamie began, his voice steady despite the tension, "because there are things I've seen that I can no longer pretend didn't happen, things that keep me awake at night." The judge leaned forward. Diddy's lawyers exchanged worried glances, and Diddy himself seemed to shrink in his chair as the actor's words filled the silent courtroom. "This isn't about music," Jamie continued. "This isn't about fame or success. This is about basic humanity and the things that were taken from people who couldn't fight back." As he spoke, court officers gave sealed evidence packets to the jury. When they opened them, several jurors visibly pulled back. One woman covered her mouth. Another looked away. Whatever they were seeing changed the atmosphere in an instant. Jamie Foxx's testimony was about to take the case in a direction no one had expected, least of all Sean Diddy Combs, whose empire now balanced on the edge of complete destruction. It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with quiet conversations. The press hunched in their designated rows, and lawyers whispered strategies as they waited for the prosecution to call their next scheduled witness, a former security guard who had worked at several of Diddy's properties. But when the prosecutor instead announced the people called Jamie Foxx, the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it was a mistake. Others thought it was a publicity stunt. But the way Jamie walked to the stand, shoulders squared and gaze focused straight ahead, told everyone this was real. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy, who'd been taking notes with his lawyers, suddenly looked pale. His pen froze mid-sentence. Jamie took the oath. No eye contact with anyone. He didn't even glance at Diddy. "Mr. Foxx, thank you for appearing today," the prosecutor began. "I understand this wasn't an easy decision." Jamie nodded once, adjusting the microphone. "I'm here because it's the right thing to do." The judge allowed it, and from that moment on, the entire trial shifted because what Jamie was about to say wasn't part of any media story. It wasn't a social media leak. It was something that had haunted him for years. Jamie testified that his relationship with Diddy began in the early 2000s. They'd crossed paths at industry events, award shows, charity galas, the usual places where Hollywood and music royalty mingled. "We weren't close friends," Jamie clarified, "but in this industry, everyone knows everyone. There's a certain level of professional respect." That changed in 2012, when Jamie was invited to a private gathering at Diddy's Los Angeles home. It was supposed to be a listening party for a new artist he was launching. Jamie explained, "These happen all the time. You show up, you listen to some tracks, you network, you leave." But as the evening went on, Jamie noticed something unusual. The security was extreme, even for someone of his status. They collected phones at the door, unusual for exclusive industry events, but they also had people walking around the grounds with dogs. It felt excessive. As the party wound down around 2:00 a.m., Jamie was getting ready to leave when Diddy approached him. He said he had something special he wanted to share with a few select people, a new project he was working on that would change the game. Jamie, along with 3 other guests, followed Diddy through the main house to what appeared to be a home theater room. But it wasn't movies he wanted to show us, Jamie said, his voice growing quieter. He entered a code into a keypad behind a painting. A false wall slid open. The judge interrupted, asking Jamie to speak up. He cleared his throat and continued, "Behind that wall was a staircase leading down to a basement level, which was strange because the house had been described to us earlier as single-level construction." The basement, Jamie testified, contained several rooms, a recording studio, a lounge area with unusual furniture, and a room with a heavy door that Diddy referred to as his private studio. He was different down there, Jamie recalled, more intense, controlling. He kept talking about loyalty and discretion and having real experiences that the public would never understand. Jamie described how Diddy played several recordings, not music, but what appeared to be audio of people in distress. He called them his collection. He said they were performances from people who'd disappointed him. "I remember him saying, 'This is real power, Jamie. Not the fame, not the money, the power to make anyone do anything, and no, they'll never speak about it.'" Jamie's testimony painted a picture of an increasingly uncomfortable situation that he struggled to navigate. "I made excuses, said I had an early call time the next day, but as I was trying to leave, a young woman was brought into the basement. She looked afraid." It was at this point that Jamie decided he needed to document what was happening. "I'd left my regular phone upstairs as requested, but I had a second phone, a small flip phone I sometimes carried as a backup. It was in my jacket pocket." Over the next several months, Jamie explained, He found himself invited to more exclusive gatherings. Each time, he brought the concealed phone. I wasn't trying to set anyone up. I was trying to protect myself, to have proof of what I was seeing because it was so hard to believe. But what I captured became something else entirely. Evidence. I've kept a lot inside for a long time, Jamie said, his voice growing stronger as he continued. I've won an Oscar. I've created music that's topped charts. I've built a career I'm proud of, but none of that can hide what I saw, what I experienced, and who made it happen. He turned slightly toward Diddy. You did. Jamie told the courtroom that it started, like many Hollywood stories do, with an invitation that seemed innocent enough. It came through a mutual friend. The way they framed it, it was supposed to be a networking opportunity with potential collaborators. They said there would be producers, executives, people who could help take my career to the next level. I'd been to things like that before, so I didn't question it. But the moment Jamie arrived at the mansion in the hills, he knew something was off. The security was extreme men in tactical gear. Not just suits, ID checks, phone checks, even though everyone there was well known. The second I walked in, they took my phone, watch, and ran a scanner over me. That should have been the first red flag. They said it was for privacy, you know, to make sure no one was recording anything that could leak to the press, but it felt like something else, like they didn't want anything getting out. Jamie was escorted through the main house to the back, where a big patio overlooked the city lights. The property was spectacular, but something felt wrong. There were cameras everywhere, not just at entry points, but in nearly every room. It felt like someone was always watching. Jamie said that after about an hour of mingling and drinks, Diddy approached him directly. He said something like, "I've been watching your moves for years, smart, calculated. You understand the game better than most." And he smiled. That smile, it wasn't warmth. It was assessment. He took me aside away from the main group. Jamie continued. He started talking about levels in the industry. He said, "What you see out there," he waved toward Hollywood. "That's the surface, the real power, the real success. That's behind closed doors." Jamie followed Diddy into the house, thinking they were going to discuss a potential collaboration. Instead, what he saw shook him to the core. There was a room accessed through his office. You had to enter a code and scan a fingerprint. Inside was a monitoring station with feeds from all over the property, but also from other locations. Some I recognized as studios, other properties, some I didn't. Jamie paused, swallowing hard. I didn't know how to leave, and that was the point. "Once you're in, you're in," Jamie continued, his voice steady but hollow. A few weeks after that first night, he got a call. Blocked number. All the voice said was, "We know you're a smart man." Smart men know when to see and when to be blind. Then they hung up. He thought it was just intimidation until a package arrived at his home. It was unmarked. Inside was a USB drive. I almost didn't look, but I did. It was a video of me at the house that night. Angles I didn't know were being filmed. I don't remember parts of the evening, but there I was in rooms I barely recalled entering. There was a voice behind the camera, Diddy's voice, saying, "Everyone has a price. Everyone has a leash." Jamie testified that the fear he felt in that moment was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. I realized I wasn't invited to that party. I was being initiated. But what truly changed everything was what Jamie discovered. Months later, I was at his studio for what was supposed to be a legitimate recording session. I got lost looking for the bathroom and opened the wrong door. Inside was a small room with audio equipment, but it wasn't for music. There were labeled drives going back years, names, dates. Jamie's voice dropped and sounds. sounds no one should ever make. When prosecutors asked what he did with this information, Jamie explained that at first he did nothing. I was afraid, not just for my career, but for my life. You have to understand this wasn't just one man. This was a system with people at every level. But he had made one crucial decision that night. I started wearing a recording device. Not every time, but when I could. I needed insurance protection. I needed people to believe me if something happened. The prosecutor approached with a sealed evidence bag. "Mr. Foxx, is this the recording device you used?" Jamie identified it. The small device, no bigger than a button, had captured hours of audio over the span of nearly 2 years. And the recordings on this device, the prosecutor continued, do they include the conversation from June 15th, 2018, in the basement room of Mr. Combs' Los Angeles residence? Jamie looked directly at Diddy for the first time. Yes. The night he described his conditioning process in detail. The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to play excerpt A17 for the court." And that's when Diddy broke down. Jamie said he followed Diddy into a lower level of the Los Angeles home, thinking they were going to view some new music videos or exclusive content. Instead, what he saw shook him to the core. There were rooms with specialized equipment. Some I recognized from film sets, lighting, sound, dampening, materials. Some looked concerning restraints attached to furniture. There were others, young men and women, who moved around the space as if they were both staff and somehow inventory. And Diddy, he was completely at ease, giving a tour as if showing off a new car collection. Jamie paused, swallowing hard. I didn't know how to leave. And that was the point. Once you're in, you're in. Jamie continued, his voice steady but hollow. A few days after that tour, he got a call-blocked number. All the voice said was, "We appreciate your discretion. Remember, in this town, opportunities come to those who understand the value of loyalty." Then they hung up. He thought it was just industry talk until a package arrived at his private residence. An address that wasn't public. It was unmarked. Inside was a USB drive. I almost didn't look, but I did. It was a video of me in that basement, looking uncomfortable, but saying nothing, nodding along. I don't remember all the details of that night, clearly, but there I was appearing to approve of what I was seeing. There was a voice behind the camera, Diddy's voice, saying, "See, everyone has a role to play. Some perform, some direct, some watch, but everyone participates." Jamie testified that the fear he felt in that moment was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. I realized I wasn't invited to those gatherings as a guest. I was being compromised. The recording Jamie had secretly made that night, the one now entered into evidence, captured Diddy explaining his methodology. You have to break them down completely before you build them back up. Diddy's voice said clearly on the recording, strip everything, their identity, their confidence, their connections. Once they're isolated, dependent, that's when you own them, not just their careers, everything. The recording continued with Diddy describing how he would identify potential victims, usually young artists or models, desperate for a break in the industry. He would offer opportunities, mentorship, even living accommodations. Then would come the parties, the gradual exposure to more extreme situations, and finally the recordings that ensured their silence. The smart ones figure out the system and become part of it. Diddy's voice explained. The ones who resist. Well, there are ways to handle that too. When asked by prosecutors why he didn't come forward sooner, Jamie's response was blunt. Fear not just for my career, but my life. You have to understand this wasn't just one man. This was a network with reach into every corner of the industry. Jamie described how after that night, he began receiving strange text messages. Opportunities he'd been pursuing suddenly fell through. A film project he was developing was abruptly canceled by the studio. It started slowly, small warnings. Then my house was broken into, but nothing valuable was taken. Just personal items, things that showed they could get to me whenever they wanted. The pattern became clear. Diddy wasn't just running parties or a music empire. According to Jamie's testimony and recordings, he was operating a complex system of control, blackmail, and coercion that trapped people and kept them silent through a combination of fear, complicity, and the threat of destroyed careers. The most disturbing revelation came when Jamie described finding a notebook in Diddy's office during another visit. He'd stepped out to take a call. The notebook was open on his desk. It had names, categories, and what looked like rankings. Next to some names were notes like fully controlled or liability, needs leverage or ready for disposal. People were being classified like inventory. When Jamie saw his own name in the book, with the notation, potential asset needs pressure, he knew he had to do something. That's when I started wearing the recording device more consistently. Not every time, but whenever I thought it would be safe enough. I needed evidence. I needed people to believe me. Jamie said that's when the manipulation intensified. I'd get invites to more exclusive gatherings. I declined when I could. Then suddenly, a film I was set to direct lost funding. People I'd worked with for years stopped returning calls. Rumors started online that I was difficult on set, that I was experiencing mental health issues, that I had substance abuse problems. I knew what it was. It was pressure. Diddy didn't need to directly threaten me. He just made it clear that silence was the cost of peace. And so for years, Jamie said nothing. He smiled through interviews, brushed off rumors about his absences from public life, focused on select projects. But every time I saw a news story about someone else speaking out, like Cassie Ventura or other accusers, I thought, if they're speaking, why am I still quiet? He looked around the courtroom. Diddy didn't just ruin people's careers. He made them fear telling the truth. And that, Jamie said, was what finally brought me to court. Jamie paused, glanced at the jury, and leaned closer to the mic. It wasn't just the recordings. That was the leash, he said. From that moment on, everything he did felt like it had strings attached to it. He explained that calls would come through intermediaries connected to Diddy's business empire, requests to attend certain events, suggestions to avoid particular journalists. When he would say no, things would shift behind the scenes. I'd say no to appearing at a club opening Diddy was investing in, and the next week I'd find out a talk show appearance had been canceled without explanation. Jamie said this didn't happen once or twice. It became a pattern. Diddy didn't have to directly threaten people. He had systems that did it for him. Entertainment lawyers, publicity teams, venue owners, studio executives. He knew who to call. He knew how to make problems appear out of thin air, and how to make opportunities vanish just as fast. What finally pushed Jamie to his breaking point was learning about a young actor who had attended one of Diddy's parties on Jamie's recommendation. 3 weeks later, this promising young man, someone with real talent, withdrew from the industry completely, moved back to his hometown. Wouldn't take my calls. His mother finally told me he wouldn't even listen to music anymore, let alone pursue acting. Jamie's voice cracked for the first time. I had unwittingly led someone into that situation. That's when I knew my silence wasn't just protecting myself, it was enabling harm to continue. Text messages, emails, and notes he'd kept hand, taking them first to his attorney, then to federal investigators who were already building a case. They asked me if I was willing to testify, knowing what it could mean for my career, my reputation, maybe even my safety. I said yes, because there are some things more important than all of that. The defense attorneys objected repeatedly throughout this testimony, claiming it was prejudicial, based on hearsay, or irrelevant to the specific charges. Each time the judge overruled them, finding that the pattern of behavior was directly relevant to establishing the methods of coercion alleged in the indictment. As Jamie continued detailing that systematic way, Diddy allegedly controlled people in the industry. The music mogul's composure visibly deteriorated. His typical confident posture gave way to hunched shoulders, his jaw clenched and unclenched. Several times he whispered urgently to his lawyers, who appeared increasingly concerned. This wasn't the testimony of a disgruntled associate or a scorned business partner. This was Jamie Foxx, respected actor, musician, comedian, methodically outlining a system of control and intimidation that he claimed reached into every corner of entertainment world. Jamie's voice dropped to a quieter, deeper tone. I stayed quiet for almost a decade. I convinced myself it wasn't happening, or that it wasn't happening on the scale I feared. But then the videos of Cassie Ventura being assaulted started to surface. He said the first time he saw the hotel hallway footage of Diddy attacking Cassie, he didn't want to believe it. Then I got a call, not from my agent or manager, but from someone I used to trust in the industry. They said, Jamie, they're building a defense strategy that will involve discrediting witnesses. People are talking. Jamie described feeling like the floor had dropped from under him. I didn't even know the FBI investigation had advanced that far. But once I accepted it was happening, everything else started to connect. Jamie said he stayed up all night replaying memories, the basement rooms, the recordings, the young people who seemed to rotate through Diddy's entourage, appearing briefly in the spotlight before disappearing entirely. It was all a system, and I was one of the witnesses who could expose it. He said the breaking point wasn't fear, it was guilt. I realized that if I didn't speak now, my silence would become my legacy, and I couldn't live with that. My kids are going to see these headlines. My family would have to answer questions. I had to speak. Jamie told the court he contacted federal prosecutors himself after learning of the investigation. I told them, I have recordings. I have evidence. Whatever questions you have, I'll answer them. He looked at the jury. I wasn't just a witness. I was used. I was recorded, and I was leveraged. And you knew exactly what you were doing. Prosecutor approached with another sealed evidence bag. Mr. Foxx, is this the final recording you made at Mr. Combs' Miami residence on New Year's Eve, 2020? Jamie identified it. This recording, made nearly 2 years after the first, captured what prosecutors alleged was Diddy explicitly threatening Jamie and others who he suspected might be cooperating with authorities. And on this recording, the prosecutor continued, is this where Mr. Combs discusses what he calls his insurance policy? Yes, Jamie replied, where he details the compromising material he has on dozens of industry figures, and how he would use it if anyone ever turned against him. The courtroom fell completely silent as the prosecutor prepared to play the recording. Diddy's lead attorney rose to object, but before he could speak, something unexpected happened. Diddy himself stood up. Your Honor, he said, his voice shaking, I need a moment with my attorneys. But as his legal team tried to huddle around him, Diddy suddenly slammed his hand on the table. Enough. He shouted loud enough to make the court reporter jump. Enough of this. The judge immediately called for order, threatening to have Diddy removed if he couldn't control himself. Marshals moved closer to the defense table. Diddy's lawyers managed to calm him enough to sit down, but the damage was done. The composed, powerful figure had cracked. Tears were visible on his face, and his hands trembled as he reached for a glass of water. When order was restored, the prosecution played the final recording. Diddy's voice, slightly slurred, but unmistakable, saying, Nobody ever leaves the family. Nobody ever really gets out. I've got something on everyone. The day someone tries to take me down is the day I burn this whole industry to the ground." As the recording played, Jamie Foxx sat straight in the witness chair, unflinching, his eyes fixed on Diddy, who could no longer meet his gaze. The judge allowed Jamie to speak directly to Diddy. He stood from the witness chair, walked a few feet closer, and looked him in the eye. "You built an empire out of fear," he began. "You called it networking. You called it mentoring. You called it the family business, but all you built was a prison for others and now for yourself." Diddy didn't respond. He sat there motionless, his lawyer whispering in his ear. Jamie didn't blink. "I saw what you did to those young artists. I saw what you tried to do to me. I heard the things you said when you thought no one who would ever speak up was listening. You broke people for power." Then Jamie pulled something from his pocket, a small flash drive on a keychain. "This contains the first contract I ever signed in this industry back in 1991, before I met you. That's the Jamie Foxx I used to be." He held it up to the court. "Someone with dreams, with hope, with belief in an industry I loved. I haven't felt like him in years." Jamie turned to the jury. "If you think this is just about parties or music or one man's behavior, you're not seeing the whole picture. This is about a system designed to silence victims and protect predators. And if we don't tear it down, it will keep going." Then he faced Diddy one last time. "You once said, 'Can't nobody hold me down?' Well, the truth just did." Jamie walked back to the stand, picked up his things, and exited the courtroom without looking back. And did he? Because for the first time in decades, he wasn't the one controlling the room. When Jamie Foxx stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't look like someone who had won anything. He looked like someone who had finally stopped running. The courtroom was still tense, almost unsure how to breathe again. Even the judge looked shaken. Some of the jurors had tears in their eyes, and Diddy, for the first time in the entire trial, looked like he had nothing left to say. Jamie didn't speak to the press when he exited. He didn't wave, didn't posture. He walked out the front of the courthouse with his head held high, but his shoulders carried the weight of nearly 10 years of silence. When asked later by reporters if he felt relieved, he reportedly responded, "Relief isn't what this is about. It's about responsibility." Sometimes staying silent is as harmful as causing the damage yourself. But outside the courtroom, the world was only beginning to react. The entertainment industry went into a quiet panic. Studio executives called emergency meetings. Record labels paused contract negotiations. Celebrities who had once proudly posted photos with Diddy were now issuing carefully worded statements of shock and dismay. Behind closed doors, crisis management teams were activated. Publicists sent internal memos urging clients to distance themselves from anyone connected to Diddy's inner circle. And while many tried to pretend they were shocked, social media was already compiling years of ignored warnings, overlooked accusations, and red flags that had been dismissed. Old interviews resurfaced, showing Diddy's controlling behavior. Previous legal settlements were re-examined in a new light, and most painfully, former artists who had once been rising stars before suddenly disappearing from the industry were being rediscovered and their stories amplified. Fans weren't just shocked, they were furious. Furious that someone like Jamie Foxx had to carry this burden alone. Furious that for years allegations had been brushed aside as industry politics, or just how the business works, and furious that the entertainment system had stayed quiet for so long. The era of silence was ending. And as more witnesses came forward in the days following Jamie's testimony, it became clear that this case wasn't just about one man. It was about an entire system built to protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. As this story continues to develop, we'll bring you the latest updates on this unprecedented case that's shaking the foundations of the entertainment world. Make sure to like and subscribe to stay informed as more details emerge from what prosecutors are now calling just the tip of the iceberg. The truth is finally coming to light, and it's more disturbing than anyone imagined.